Welcome back. This is my fifth video on my browser games tutorial series, and I apologize for being so late in uploading. Hopefully this will be a lot more consistent. In the last video, we talked about user input and two different ways we can get user input. The prompt function, which will give you basically anything the user types, the confirm function, which will give you true or false, and then we added this alert, even though this doesn't mean user input. This is just similar to the other two. User input allows our programs to be a little bit more dynamic because when I run this here, I get multiple outcomes. So I'm going to put Matt, I'm going to put some random numbers here. I'm going to click OK, OK. Now in our console over here, there's multiple different outcomes. Like if I wanted a different running outcome besides this, all I'd have to do is refresh and enter different stuff. And this is important because when we eventually start going over games, it's important to get your programs to be able to do different outcomes. And so that's why we went over user input. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk is the second piece to making your programs more dynamic. And I wanted to talk about conditionals. Conditionals are just things that help you do more processing in your code. There are three different kinds of conditionals: if statements, else if statements, and else statements. If that made zero sense, it is about to make sense. So I'm going to delete all this. We're going to make a program that will ask for the user's age. So var age is equal to prompt enter your age, something like that. Now, if the age is 18 or up, we're going to say you are an adult. If the age is 13 to 18, we're going to say you are a teenager. And if the age is anything less, then we're going to say you are a child. Even though I don't really think a 12-year-old is a child, for the purpose of this program, it's good enough for me. Right now, knowing with all we know, we have no way of doing that. Console.log, you are an adult. How do I tell my browser to only render this message if this is 18? Well, this is where our conditionals come in. We're going to use, well, here's the first conditional. I'm going to use an if statement. If, then opening parentheses, age, is greater than or equal to, I'm typing those separately. There is no keyboard button for the greater than equal to sign for math. So we just, in code, you just compensate by adding them both separate. Greater than, equal to. If the age is greater than or equal to 18, closing parentheses. Now I'm going to add an opening curly bracket. I'm going to click enter twice, a closing curly bracket, and in between these two curly brackets, which are highlighted in red if you use Notepad++, I'm going to put this statement, and I'm going to tab it over like that. Now, that was a lot. Let me go over it again. We are processing if the age is greater than or equal to 18, and we only want this message to display if it is so. So I start with if. Then in these parentheses, I have my condition. If this condition is true, then anything in between these two curly brackets will happen. So this line of code will happen. So if this condition is true, anything between these two will occur. And now last thing, you just generally indent because it's easier to see that this line of code goes inside of this if statement if it is indented like this. Don't go too much, don't go too little, or like this, that's really confusing. But generally, if you're putting something inside an if statement, you tab it over. Now we have a little bit more dynamic of a program. Let's run it and actually prove that it works. The first time I'm going to type in 17. 17 is not greater than or equal to 18, so this is going to be skipped over. This will never happen. And just so that we can see when the program ends, I'm going to add console.log program end, like that. So I'm going to run this page. Oh, and it's going over the old example. Here we go. Enter your age. I'm going to put 17. And in the console, we get program end without anything else. program end. We stopped there. So now if I run it again and I enter like 55, you are an adult, and then we get program end. That's how an if statement works. Now let's add a few more. I want to add a different response for if the age is 13 to 18. So here's where our second conditional statement comes in. I said there was 3. Here's the second one. Else if, that's the second one, opening parentheses, age is greater than or equal to 13, closing parentheses, 2 curly brackets, and inside of here, console.log, you are, I already forgot what I was putting in here. Oh, a teenager. There we go. Like that. Now, notice I didn't actually have to put age, I didn't have to specify the range 13 to 18. I just put greater than or equal to 13. That's because this one kind of takes care of that. If I put in a 17, 17 is not greater than or equal to 18, so this will not happen. Else if statements this will pick it up, and then it will ask, well, is 17 greater than or equal to 13? Well, yes, so you are a teenager. So even though I didn't put the range 13 to 18 or anything like that, it's kind of taken care of already because I have this up here. If I entered 18, this would happen and this would not, which is a very important feature of else if statements. Else if statements will only check this condition if this condition, the one that came before, is false. So if I enter 100 and this condition is true, we're not even going to bother with any of this stuff. That's what else if statements do. They only check if what came before is false. So now we can enter a 14 and we're going to get the message you are a teenager because 14, this condition fails, but this one is true. Now let's add that last message. Let's just say if you enter any other number, even if it's a negative number, we're just going to say you are a child. So I'm going to add our third condition, our third conditional statement, else, and this is like the default one. So there is no condition here. An else statement only runs if the conditions that came before are false. So this will only happen if this is false and this is false. And this is like your default. So if everything else is false, then this is what you get. So console.log, you are a child, and that's probably deserving if you purposefully enter a negative number for an age input. So I guess that's fitting. Let's run this. And I'm going to prove that it's worked. I'm going to put negative 55. You are a child. Why? Because negative 55 is not greater than or equal to 18, so this statement skipped. Control goes next to this because this was false. Negative 55 is not greater than or equal to 13, so this is also skipped. Control is then passed to else, and this is then what occurs. Now, before I conclude the video, I want to give one last example. So this is the introduction to if statements. I'm going to give one more example. I'm going to delete all this, and I'm going to make a different program. It's going to be a program where you enter a number from 1 to 4, but anything else that you enter, the program will yell at you. So let's see that in action. I'm going to put, and I'll comment it out just so you can keep seeing it. So I'm going to put a /* here and a /* here. Basically, I made all this code ineffective. I can talk about comments for next time. So just so you can still see it here, I'm going to type var number is equal to prompt, enter a number from 1 to 4. And now let's check if the number is 5. And we're just going to add a message like, you entered 5. This is really kind of useless, but just to learn about these conditional statements. So I'm going to say if number, and notice here, equals 5. Then, and everything else is the same, curly brackets and all, console.log, you entered a 5. Now notice I used 2 equal signs. I wanted to see if number was equal to 5. Let me give my short explanation for why this is. If you have a variable and you want to assign it to a number like 7, you use 1 equal sign. I am assigning the value of 7 to A. A is now equal to 7. It is the same as 7. But if I want to see if A is equal to 7, then I say A equals 7. And so to really shorten this, if you're setting a variable, you use 1. If you are comparing a variable to a value, you use 2. So that's why in our if statement, I use 2. If number is equal to 5, you enter a 5, and I know this works, but before I add 1, 2, and 3, oh, sorry, I said 1 to 4. That was probably confusing. We're entering numbers from 1 to 4. So number is equal to 4, console.log, you entered a 4. One more thing to note, I taught previously that you almost always use semicolons. And you've probably noticed by now, I did not use a semicolon at the end of this line. I did not use a semicolon at the end of this line. And I'm really not going to go in depth of why that is, but you can just kind of think of these as exceptions. You really don't put semicolons after these curly brackets, and that's not a super in-depth explanation, but it's all we need for our purposes. So if I put in a 4, we're going to get you entered a 4, and then program end, but let's add the other ones. Else if, otherwise, if this is not 4, then we're going to check the next one. Number equals 3, curly brackets, console.log, you entered a 3. Now I'm going to add the next one, else if number is equals 2, then console.log, you entered a 2. And a word about copying and pasting. Copying and pasting is totally acceptable only after you already understand a code concept. So I've been using these for years, so I feel totally fine with copying. I'm just going to copy that and change these to 1s. Now, this program will work for the values 1 to 4. Number is equal to 4, this will happen. If it's 3, this will happen. If it's 2, this will happen. And before we move on to add that statement that yells at you if you enter a number that's not 1 to 4, before I show you how to do that, I want to explain this. You might be wondering, why are there 3 different kind of conditional statements? I mean, can't they all just be if? Well, they could. This could be if, this could be if, and this could be if. But remember, else if only runs if what came above is false. And this is redundant processing. This is a waste of your computer processing. If the number is 4 and it's found out right away that number is 4, there is no need to check this or this or this. However, if you leave it as an if statement, you force your browser to check all of them. So if I enter a 4, this is going to be true, this is going to happen. But now I still got to check all of these, which seems like a total waste of time. If my only options are 1 to 4, there's no need to check for 3, 2, or 1. It's like me walking in a fast food restaurant and I want the meal, the number 4 meal, whatever that looks like. And I ask for it. And then the employee immediately asks, did you want to choose 3? Well, no. I already made one choice here, and I don't get to choose twice. Okay, well, did you want 2? No, I already chose 4. You can stop here. That was a really kind of corny analogy, but it explains why we don't do redundant checking. If you only have these options and one of them is already selected, you don't need to check the other ones. That's what else if is used for. Else if will cancel the processing if what came above is false. So if I enter a 3, this will be false, control is passed to here. This will be true, so this happens, and these will be skipped. Now, if we run this, I'm going to enter a 3, you entered a 3. I'm going to enter a 1, you entered a 1. And it works for all my other values there. Now, if I enter a -1, I want the program to yell at me. we're going to use an else. Else. And there is no condition, so I just add the curly brackets. Console.log you are a child. Yes, let's just do that. You are a child if you did not follow these instructions. 55, you are a child. So the way this else is useful because if it's our default, it's our last resort. If all of these were not true, then no matter what, be it -1 or 999, this is what will happen. All right, this video has run long enough. That is my introduction to conditionals, and if that did not make a whole lot of sense, you can go through it a few more times. And really, I never got as huge of an explanation as I'm giving you all now. So it's totally fine to learn this without all the special details. You kind of learn this as you go. So if you learned a lot from this, great. If you need just more examples in future videos, you're going to get that. But thank you for watching.